Greetings, I am BlazeLeeDragon, and today I'm going to talk about a topic that some might find offense to. Hopefully you'll find it as something that will encourage you to consider different possibilities. Now obviously, anytime that I create a video, I'm sharing my personal thoughts and insights based upon my current state as it is in the path of spiritual enlightenment or seeking or just researching in general. So these are my personal thoughts. Now, that doesn't make them 100% right or accurate, but at least take it into consideration. Now, my intent, of course, is not to offend anyone with my videos. So keep that in mind as we go forward through this. But I believe that there is a misconception among folks that they believe that ancient polytheistic paganism, heathenism, whatever ancient term you want to use or modern term to refer to the ancient ways, regardless of the term that you decide to use, people believe that our ancient past is cut off from us. We no longer know what our ancestors used to do. We have nothing but the modern change to a more monotheistic viewpoint. And that different old traditions, such as Druidry, old Nordic or Scandinavian traditions, but today you commonly hear Alsetru, which is specifically the Icelandic revival movement, or you'll hear stuff like Odinism or Vodinism, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Obviously, there's different pronunciations as well. And then even if you look to some of the old different types of traditions that had to do with like witchcraft, etc., and depending on who you speak with as far as the authenticity behind some of the different traditions that are today considered Wicca, it's like folks believe that what we used to do in the olden days, we as a people, as a society, as a culture, it's gone. And I don't believe that's the case. And this is why. And so first of all, let's talk about 20 of the largest religions in the world. Christianity, Islam, non-religious, secular, agnostic, atheist, Hinduism, Chinese traditional religion, Buddhism, primal indigenous, African traditions, Skittism, Juche, I apologize, I'm butchering the pronunciation on some of these, spiritualism, Judaism, Baha, Jainism, Shinto, Kaodai, Zoroastrianism, Tenrikyo, Neo-paganism, Unitarian Universalism. So those are some of the largest, according to this one website, theregister.co.uk. Obviously, listed on here are some neo-paganism. You hear that. And you hear some of these that are not traditional monotheistic faiths. And I'm not specifically saying that just monotheism is prevalent today, but you do see a lot of different monotheistic traditions. And typically when you talk about polytheism or heathenism or paganism, polytheism just means, belief in multiple gods. Theism, poly, many, instead of mono or single theism, singular god, deity. And pagan is a term that some folks use. It used to be used very negatively, pagan or heathen. It was a bad term. But typically when you hear the term pagan today, it's sort of an umbrella term referring to some of the polytheistic traditions, especially ones that are derivative of revival movements within like Wales or Ireland or English traditions. So you'll hear a lot of stuff like Wicca or witchcraft or Druidry or things like that, typically associated with the term paganism. Whereas the term heathenism, again, used to be used as a derogatory term, usually to denote certain Scandinavian traditions, Odinism, Vodinism, if you prefer to say it that way, Alsetru, different types of traditions like that. So the reason I'm bringing all of this up is when you hear about these traditions, you'll hear a lot of stuff like neo, new, or revival, new age. You hear all these terms, and there's a lot of flack given to these different modern traditions. The first type of flack that folks will get for these modern traditions is how evil they used to be. They sacrificed people! Blood rituals! Rah! It's terrible! That's the first thing that you tend to hear a lot of from folks. The other thing that you'll hear from folks is they don't think it's evil or satanic or Satanism, which is usually placed on as a label, especially here in the US and the West. You'll hear this a lot. then you'll hear other folks say that they're basically full of shit, don't know what they're talking about, or it's just made up bullshit and, you know, new age hippie tree hugging crap. So usually you'll get one of the two. Either it's evil, it's tree hugging crap. Either way. But I don't believe that's the case. And I believe that there is some authenticity to these revival movements. And the reason I say that is because as a people, as a culture, we have things so ingrained in our culture that they survive the test of time. They survive nicknames, they survive new revival movements or new ideas or all sorts of stuff. They will just continue to go on. And what I mean by that is when we try to think about what folks used to do in the olden age, obviously scientists and archaeologists can make theories based upon the materials left over. If you find a household, or if you find items, or if you find a spiritual gathering place, there is going to be remnants, and they can make assumptions. They can also go off of stories if things were written down, or if there was images engraved in stone, for example, or whatever the case may be. There is ways to get some interpretations and impressions of what may have been. But aside from that, folks like their traditions. They like their cultural stuff. And this is what I mean by that. If you take some of these traditions that are supposed to be very prevalent throughout the world, and you talk about how they're done in different societies and cultures, you will see things that are very, very, very different, not only on the way that they pronounce some of the traditions, but they'll have stuff that is only unique to that particular culture. For example, if you take Christmas, Christ Mass, depending, doesn't matter how you pronounce it, why is it in winter? Well, to begin with, if you go by the old Julian calendar, by the Orthodox tradition, Christmas by the old Julian calendar, that got me thinking even when I was younger, like, well, what's going on with this? Well, if you think about winter and you think about Christmas, the 25th of December, what else do you have around the 25th of December? Oh, you have this little winter solstice celebration on the 21st, which is done in multiple cultures. In the Chinese traditional religions and stuff, you have Dongzi. Might be pronouncing it a little bit wrong, but 我会说一点普通话，可是我说得不好. So that's my attempt to speak the winter solstice for there. Then you have other places that, of course, do it. You have Yule, you have Alban Arthen, which is the Welsh name for it that's typically associated with modern neo-Druidry. Then, of course, you have winter solstice itself. Then you have the Nordic traditions, which will refer to it as Yule. Different than Yule. Yule. It's like, it looks Jol, but it's pronounced Yule. And that's like in Iceland and stuff like that, and some of the Scandinavian traditions. So you have the winter solstice celebrated amongst all these cultures slightly differently. The thing is, the way that they celebrate that, whether it's with Santa Claus or without Santa Claus, or the Yule lads of Iceland, you have these slight variances on how it's practiced, because culturally speaking, people do not give up their stuff. And the point I'm making is they move Christmas over around a celebration that they have been doing for ages anyway, so that people can keep their traditions. Interestingly enough, some other traditions that stood out to me. So my wife is mostly Polish, and her family is from Poland. Well, when we got a hand fasting, we actually had this really cool Polish tradition that ended up being done in salt, wine, and this coin. I know I had it written down. This is very close to what she had said here, but the bride and groom each take a piece of bread to signify, may you never go hungry. They each take a sip of wine, enjoy the sweetness in life. They each take a piece of salt on their tongue, put a little salt on their tongue. May you overcome the bitterness in life. And then a silver coin. May you be wealthy with good health and never be in a financial stress. The parents then kiss the couple as a sign of welcome and unity and love. You don't get much more polytheistic than that, but that is not celebrated in Poland as a polytheistic tradition. In fact, in Poland, you're Catholic. You just are. That's just the way it is. I believe it's Catholic. Maybe it's not Catholic. You're just Christian. I might be misquoting that. We did this in our hand fasting. We adapted that. We adapted the cultural stuff to it. And you can see the symbolism that you would adapt in some of the modern neo-pagan, neo-polytheism, neo-heathenism traditions today. We still have the silver coin. I still remember doing this with my wife. It meant a lot to us. It was part of their culture, and we kept that alive. If you look at altars, so here's the thing that might be offensive to some folks. Every religion out there, every religion, and I do have other videos on this, is made up. Period. You can argue till you're blue in the face, but you're not going to convince me otherwise. This is something I've believed for many years, and I still strongly believe to this day. In my opinion, every single religion is made up. Some person out there at some time decided this was the way to communicate with the divine. Don't care what you call it. You can call it God, goddess, spirits, gods, goddesses, the freaking one-eyed flying spaghetti monster. It doesn't matter. Each single spirituality, religion, faith, or path was made up by someone. End of story. Now, if you want to argue, and this is fine, you can say that your faith was made up from an interaction with that deity. Obviously, in the Christian or monotheistic faiths, they have the Bible, which they believe was the word of God that was given to them from God that showed them how to follow. That's fine. I'm not going to argue that point. Even if I don't believe it, I'm not going to argue it. That's fine. That's part of their core belief. That's fine, and I can respect that. You believe what you want. And obviously, in different traditions, they have other valid reasons for why theirs is not made up. But you have, if you look at this outside, take off your religious blinders for a moment, your religious alteration on how you see the world, and look at it from the outside and ignore individual. There are all these different religions and languages and cultures all around the world. So clearly, there's different ways that people adapted it and changed it. So even if certain traditions are true for certain regions and how they came about, and whatever divine inspiration gave to them, it obviously gave different inspiration throughout the world. Otherwise, we'd all have the exact same religion, wouldn't we? So, yes, like I said, I apologize if that offends you, but let's face it, religion's all made up. With that in mind, as I was saying, people don't let go of their culture and stuff. Let's look at different stuff like the altar. The altar is apparently from Latin, high altar, altar for sacrifice to the great gods, perhaps originally meaning burnt offerings. Now, the interesting thing that I want to point out specifically with sacrifice. So sacrifice is not necessarily killing something. Sacrifice is giving up something. In modern revival movements of polytheism, paganism, heathenism, etc., and I can't speak for every single revival movement out there, but the majority of them don't kill things. I'm sorry, they don't. Sorry to ruin your fantasy that they're all evil. But they will, in fact, creating or crafting something and then burning it in a fire is sacrifice. That is a way of sacrificing to the gods. Taking an expensive drink, wine or mead, and pouring it out, offering it to the gods, is a sacrifice. That's the modern version of sacrifice. But regardless of whether or not animals were slaughtered, or people, because let's face it, human sacrifice is the biggest, scariest thing in the world. Well, guess what? You see that across all of these different cultures and religions all the time. I mean, go through the Middle Ages. They burned people, sacrificed them right there to cleanse them because they weren't pure and believing in their deity. They were straight up killing people. So it happened in all of these cultures, multiples of them. But anyway, altar, and you see that in many different religions and traditions. There's this Polish tradition, drowning of Marzana, and I apologize if I'm butchering it, originating from a pagan ritual. Poles burn and drown a life-size straw doll of the Slavic goddess Marzana in a river to mark the end of winter and celebrate the coming of spring. There is, I just read the salt one, there is an Irish tradition, the Aran Island, and again I might be butchering it, during Halloween, the darkest hour of Halloween Eve, adults on, mispronouncing it, I know, Enos Moor, the largest island of the Aran Islands. Basically, they dress up in costume. They order drinks by writing it down. Nobody speaks or says a single word. Nobody leaves their house until 9. And then at midnight, that's when they all get loud and talk to each other again and have a big celebration. But these traditions, and again, Ireland today is very, very Christian. If you look at stuff like Brigid, Bride, depending on how you want to pronounce it, Bridget, Brigid is the Celtic goddess that has to do with the fire forge, inspiration, healing, water, and like many of the gods and goddesses in the Irish, Celtic, Welsh tradition, Druidry, they were turned into saints. And to this day, they will create Brigid's cross and they will like fold straw into this four-armed cross. And that was used way before predating Christianity, yet it's still done today. To this day, it got incorporated into it. If you look at some of the, like in Iceland, for example, like during their Easter celebration, so they give out these large chocolate eggs filled with sweets during the holiday. And that also brings up another point. It's like, so what does an egg have to do with Easter? Nothing. It's a fertility holiday. Egg, life, new life, spring. Nature around them is starting to mate and bring new life about. Well, guess what? That's what a lot of this stuff has to do with, is celebrating nature and the seasons. If you ignore the religious aspect of a lot of the stuff, the seasonal celebration at its core, that is why I believe we did not completely lose the way that they used to practice. It got adapted into the new way, the new thing that they created. So if you look throughout society or even your own life, you are taught how to act or how to be or how to behave or what to do from your parents, from your culture, from your society. So if you have all these traditions and you're trying to push in new stuff, even if you try to learn a new skill or a new trade or a new language, you're still going to adapt the way you were raised into that, and it's going to modify that. So in my personal belief and personal opinion, when you have these newly created religions like Christianity, you see them wearing robes with staves, altars, and incense, candles, with a book that they're reading out of saying prayers to honor their God. Guess what? What do you think a lot of modern neo-pagans do? They're wearing robes in front of an altar talking to their gods. Now, was that what they used to do in the olden days? Yeah, probably was. Again, you see what was done by your ancestors, and you don't let go of it. So if you're creating a new religion, and your religious past was to have altars to your gods and goddesses, and you put stuff on the altar for them, or you wore robes, that's what you do for religion. You wear these robes. It's a spiritual connection thing. So obviously, when you create a new one, you're going to use those representations. You'll see the same thing when people write fictional stories and they will base it upon real life because they're basing it upon the examples that they're familiar with. Sure, people come up with original ideas now and then, but again, just look at any religion, how it's practiced today, and that will give you insight of how they used to worship the gods or goddesses or spirit, nature, whatever the case may be, of the olden days. You'll still see it in today's society. Interestingly enough, too, like I said, you'll see even the same supposed religion will vary greatly from culture to culture because a lot of these traditions or how they celebrated or practices are cultural based. Again, based upon the people and the area and the way that they were raised. So I don't think we completely have no idea. I just think that we don't have a clear, unspoiled sense of it. But even if we look at that, if you look at the way that the different faiths that are supposedly super old and survived, if you look at Hinduism, if you look at Buddhism, if you look at Chinese traditional religion, if you look at some of the Christianity religions, I personally believe they have changed greatly. And you will even see this from city to city, from country to country, from state to state, from church to church, or gathering, because obviously the church is specifically referring to more of the Christian faiths. But you will see variances. I've seen folks, so I posted a video where me and my wife were talking about Hinduism because she was reading up on it. She thought it was interesting. She read these books, so she shared her thoughts. We actually had different Hindus, all arguing about what was right or what was wrong about the video we did. We had some folks saying we had it spot on. We had other folks saying we were completely wrong and don't know what we're talking about. And it was wild to me because we were literally just sharing our thoughts on a book that she had read and talking about it. She had talked to other individuals as well who are Hindus, and some believe that you can't be a Hindu unless you're born a Hindu because you have to be Indian. You have to actually be born a Hindu. Otherwise, you can't become one. And then we've had other Hindus say that you can. So it's like, again, there's this vast array and differences. If you look at Christianity, look at all the different denomination, whether you're Catholic or Protestant or Evangeline or whatever the case may be, might be pronouncing that wrong. I'm not like an expert on all of those traditions or denominations, but you'll even see different versions of the Bible. And people will argue about whether you read the Bible or you were inspired by the Bible or you study the Bible and how you study it and ways you interpret it. So if you think too about the way that the church used to be thousands of years ago, they're not burning people at the stakes anymore, thank the gods. So there's going to be a change as we progress through society. Things will change and alter. And I think the same was true of a lot of these polytheistic, pagan, heathen, whatever old traditions that are supposedly gone today. I think there's still remnants of them left over. And I think that they would have changed and they would have varied. So when you have these neo revival movements, new age stuff, they're trying to tap into their ancient past because they feel a calling to it, whether it's from their ancestors or their DNA, or it just sings to them in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's just as simple as they saw a movie or a comic book or a game and there was something magical about it that just drew them in, or maybe it's in their calling. Whatever it is that draws people to the old ways, it makes them want to tap in and they feel a kinship to their ancestors. A lot of these new age movements that I've seen is very, very much about connecting with your ancestors, where you come from, the earth, the roots. People want to feel like they belong. And again, these cultural traditions stay alive. So if you look back at what some of them are doing, you'll see elements of what many might actually consider, especially if you put it into a different culture. If you take some of these elements of these supposed traditions that are supposed to be Christianized today, and you realize they're only cultural based, and you take them to a different culture, those cultures might consider them paganistic or heathenistic, or just, again, having to do with the old gods. So it's just interesting to think about. So, this has been a very long video, and I appreciate you sitting through it. And of course, like I said, these are just my thoughts. Doesn't make them right or accurate. But this is the way that I look at it. I don't believe we lost how to honor the gods and goddesses, the spirits, beings, existence itself. I think we have just found most of it had been watered down as it was absorbed into newly created paths. So I think we have essence of what was once there. And I think that we can still glean inspiration and wisdom. So when you see new movements trying to revive pieces or aspects of the old ways, that doesn't make them wrong, doesn't make them evil. It just makes them individuals who found a connection in a different way. And to me, I think that's a beautiful thing. And even if it's something that's brand new, the people that originally created all these religions, regardless of what religion it was, because I really do believe they were all made up by humankind, it was their way of interpreting it and connecting, whether it be people pointing at something in nature that was vast and beyond them and believing that was a deity. If that was the case and that was how it was all started, somehow they found some sort of reverence. Maybe a lightning bolt hit a tree and the tree was now associated with this particular element or deity, god or goddess, and that became a symbol and it grew. Whatever it was that first initiated these initial sparks into it, what allowed that first person to interpret, invent, or create that, what made them so much more special than people today, someone who throws something together. One of the talks I might eventually have is something on different things that are not revival movements but brand new creation. But that's the thing. It's like, what are we all trying to accomplish ultimately with our religious practice or spirituality? It doesn't have to even be religion per se. Our spirituality or connection with the divine. What are we seeking? At the end of the day, people are looking for all sorts of things, whether it be a meaning or purpose to life, or a connection with something beyond ourselves, or respect for world and existence itself. There's many reasons to seek and look for spirituality of some form. And to me, as long as you're not harming people, you're not trying to hurt others or center them out, I don't see any problem with trying to seek different ways of connecting with the divine. You don't have to be the bitch of somebody else's religion. You can forge your own through your own research and through your own experiences. So anyway, thank you for watching. Remember to thumb up, like, and subscribe. And remember, hit that bell notification icon so you know when I upload my next video, whatever it may be in regards to. You never know what I'm going to upload here. But anyway, thanks for watching, and you have yourself a great day.